Hello, my name is Jennifer Rickerby, and I am a doctoral nursing practice student at George Mason University. I'm here to share with you Module 1 in the Cultural Competency Training Series, which is about understanding terms. Here is an overview of the modules in training, and as you can see, highlighted is Module 1, which is understanding terms. Here is the icon key, and just to remind you, the head with the cogwheels are indicating critical thinking exercises to deepen learning. The hammer are actions to complete. The movie screen are videos to be observed, which will be played and links will be provided. And the eye with the circle is further information that can be clicked on, printed out, and etc. for future reference. Here are the objectives of what we were trying to achieve today. Upon completion of this module, the learner will be able to compare the cultural evolution of the population and show a justification for the need for cultural competence. They'll be able to classify elements that make up cultural and demonstrate understanding of how diversity within the culture can affect an individual's own cultural identity. Distinguish the difference between values and beliefs and indicate how they are incorporated into one's culture. We're going to assess for assimilation versus culture shock and recognize that depression can be a risk factor. Describe the elements needed to achieve cultural competence on the cultural continuum, and last, assess for risks of stereotyping in practice to avoid negative consequences. Here is the cultural breakdown of the United States. You've probably heard that the United States is becoming more diverse, so let's really look at what that breaks down to in terms of statistics. This is from the United States Census Bureau in 2015. You can see that the population was primarily white with 77.4%. Behind that is the Hispanic or Latino population at 17.4%, and behind that are the Black and African American populations at 13.2%, and then it trickles down to Asian, American Indian, Alaskan Native, and Native Hawaiian or other. The last one listed there is two or more races, which accounts for 2% of the population. What this means is that some people will assimilate with more than one culture. For instance, if they have different parents from different cultures, they may assimilate with one or both of those cultures. Now, let's look at what the future is going to look like for the United States population. In the year 2060, the white population is going to be 42.6%, with a doubling of Hispanic or Latino population at 30.6%. The Black or African American population stays consistently the same. We also have an increase in the Asian population, and people that are going to assimilate with two or more races are going to go up to 4.8%. So this all totals more than 100%, and that is due to the fact that people are fitting into more than one cultural identity. This is a visual of the different populations, and the minority population is projected to become the numerical majority of the United States population in the year 2043. This really puts a real emphasis on why we need to become culturally competent to different diverse populations, because it will become the majority in the future. So what is cultural assimilation? So here we have two famous families that create mixed racial families. So I have a question. If a child was born to a Chinese mother, but was then adopted to an African American family, what culture do you think the child would assimilate to? Chinese or African American? The answer is African American. Whatever culture that child was grown into will be the culture that they will assimilate to. So here's some key terms. Assimilation is taking on cultural beliefs and values from another person, family, or social environment. Cultural identity is the culture in which a person identifies with or has assimilated to. Culture shock is the discomfort felt when an individual is placed into a new culture. So this could be even when you go on to a trip and you visit maybe a foreign country, you're feeling that culture shock and discomfort as you're unfamiliar with the culture and maybe immersed into it. So let's stop and think. What culture do you personally assimilate to? How did you learn about that culture? And have you changed your culture from childhood to adulthood? Some people grow up in one environment but then move to another. So has your cultural identity changed at all? What traditions does your culture carry out or believe in? For instance, do you put up a Christmas tree? How does this differ from people you see in practice? Question: is culture innate or learned in nature? Culture is learned. It's acquired from immediate parents or caregivers. It is something that you pick up and perhaps extracted from the environment or the community that you've grown up in. It's a result of social interactions with your friends. So this might be when children get together and they use similar lingo and they all say the similar catchphrases. You'll notice that they may start to dress the same or wear similar things. It's all about that social interaction. It's accumulation of personal experiences, and it's necessary. It's comforting, and it reduces stress to be part of a culture. So what happens when people cannot connect or adapt to any specific culture? So when can they not develop or have a lack of cultural identity? They may experience feelings of having lack of control, perhaps stress, negative social connections, and then ultimately leading to feeling ashamed. This all leads to cultural clashes, loss of cultural identity, which also leads to depression, and worst of all, suicidal ideation. So culture is something that is definitely a basic need to feel part of a community. Diversity can also be felt within a culture. So you may have two people that are perhaps Hispanic in their race. However, they're not going to celebrate every single holiday the same, or they may not necessarily eat the same foods or even speak the same dialect of the language. This circle that I put together here has to do with what encompasses culture, which is beliefs, language, religion, foods, behaviors, attitudes, rituals, customs, and what they do in terms of arts and drama or entertainment. So diversity can occur with what nationality they're brought up, perhaps lifestyle. Sexual orientation may change somebody's culture or their view or lens on how culture should be projected. It may be according to their birthplace, maybe food types, even foods that are available in their specific area that they live in. If they've experienced discrimination, what their health is, and what their access to care is, specifically their socioeconomic status. So what influences our values? And you can see that there's personal thoughts, family, community, nationality, religion, and education. All of these inputs start to develop a person's values. It may be where they went to school. It may be what their mother or their father believes they should do, what influences the community has around them, or even what their nationality is. So take a second to the cogwheel on the left-hand side, and it asks you, how can media affect values? So next we have beliefs. Beliefs are values that are often faith-driven and inclusive in decision-making process. So this is important when people are making health decisions to think about how those decisions are made. Beliefs include thoughts and actions based on experience, which leads to outcomes. Beliefs drive the mindset of the individual. So the patient may have thoughts, actions, beliefs, experiences that all lead to an outcome that encompasses their cultural mindset that takes into major account when they're making big health decisions. So this is just a little circle that I see that the values are at the center of one's being. Beliefs build on a person's values, and then culture I see as encompassing and surrounding one person's values and beliefs. So what does it take to be culturally competent? So first of all is cultural brokerage. Many of us are cultural brokers, meaning that we try to bridge, link, or mediate between groups of persons of different culture. I consider this advocacy. We advocate for those that need it to get them to the correct place in healthcare. Being culturally sensitive. This is the delivery of healthcare that's based on cultural norms, values, social beliefs, and historical or environmental factors. So being culturally sensitive essentially means that you have an awareness of other people's culture. It does not mean that you have to be an expert on every single culture to be culturally sensitive or competent. It just means that you have a heightened awareness that people do things differently and are accepting of that. Cultural humility is maintaining an open interprofessional stance in relation to what is most important to that person. So this is compassion. I see this as being a compassionate person when you can look at another person and try to look at what their stance is and where they're coming from. Cultural responsiveness is the ability to respond to the culture of that diverse community. And I see this as adaptability. So cultural competence is the knowledge and ability to work with culturally diverse populations, irrespective of what their language, customs, beliefs, values, communications, and actions of people according to their race and ethnicity. It's a set of congruent behaviors and attitudes or policies that come together in a system, agency, or among health professionals that enables efficient work in cross-cultural situations. As I mentioned on the previous slide, awareness leads to compassion, which leads to adaptability, and which leads to advocacy for that patient, and all of those things together make the practitioner a culturally competent individual. This is the cultural competency continuum. Cultural competence builds on the concept of cultural sensitivity. So starting at the left, where the red box is, you can see cultural destructiveness. This is someone who is forced into assimilation. They may possibly have rights and privileges for the dominant group only. Then moves to cultural incapacity, which is racism. It's maintained, there are stereotypes, there's unfair hiring practices, there's things that are incapacitating cultural. Cultural blindness is differences that are ignored. If I treat everybody the same, that only means that I'm not identifying the person as having a different culture, which is called cultural blindness. Cultural precompetence is the exploration of cultural issues. It's starting to become familiar with this. Cultural competence is recognizing that there are individual and cultural differences, and you seek advice from diverse groups, you ask questions, and you hire culturally unbiased staff. Becoming culturally proficient means that you're implementing changes to improve services based on cultural needs. It's changing the culture to include culture. Cultural blindness. This is the treatment, as I said, of all people the same, no matter their cultural background. You hear people say, I treat everyone the same, no matter who they are. When I see minority children with disabilities, I do not see color or disability. I only see children. The problem with this is that you aren't recognizing that the patient has a different culture, which has needs attached to that. Also, not seeing a person's disability is also ignoring the fact that they may have special needs. We can't necessarily treat everybody the same. So here's a short case study. Taking the example of our Chinese child that was adopted into an African American family, consider this scenario. Later in life, this woman has her very first child. During her pregnancy, she felt down and depressed, but thought it was a normal part of pregnancy and not report her feelings to the provider. After her delivery and during her postpartum period, the nurse on the unit notices the new mother seems down, does not speak very much, and avoids eye contact. During handover, she suggests to the oncoming nurse that a PHQ-9 or a depression screening should be done. The oncoming nurse states, she is an Asian mother. Asian mothers are usually quiet and avoid eye contact. She will feel better when she gets home. Reminder, what culture does this woman assimilate with? We decided that she assimilated with African American culture because that was the culture that she grew up in. Question, what type of reaction is this considered by the oncoming nurse? The answer is stereotyping.